They fired on a captain who had permission to pass. He was on their list. He had clearance. He had done everything right. And as IRGC fast boats opened fire without warning, his voice cracked over the open maritime radio channel, broadcast live to every ship in the Gulf. You gave me clearance to go. You are firing now. Let me turn back. There was no response. That moment, desperate, raw, and caught on recording, is the moment the world stopped pretending this was still a standoff. This was now a war over the most valuable 33 kilometers of ocean on the planet. And within hours of that captain's plea going unanswered, the United States did something it had never done before in this conflict. It sent Marines onto an Iranian ship in the dead of night and took it. But here is what almost nobody is telling you. The seizure of that ship was not the beginning. It was not even the middle. It was the first public move in a campaign that Washington had been planning, pre-positioning, and rehearsing for weeks. And what comes next, in the next 72 hours, could determine whether global oil prices double, whether the Middle East tips into open war, and whether a diplomatic back channel that Iran's own officials called the most intensive engagement in 47 years survives the night. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand not just what happened, but exactly what Washington is trying to force Iran to choose between. And the choice is brutal. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now. We cover this crisis daily with the depth it actually deserves. And this story is moving faster than any outlet can keep up with. Let's go back to April 17th, because before we talk about Marines and gunfire and seized ships, we need to talk about the 24 hours that gave the world hope and then ripped it away. On the morning of April 17th, Iran announced that the Strait of Hormuz was open, fully open. Commercial vessels, tankers, cargo ships, free passage. The narrow 33-kilometer choke point through which roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply flows had been a pressure point for days. And suddenly, it wasn't. Brent crude fell toward its lowest level in weeks. Markets exhaled. Diplomats in Washington and Islamabad used words like progress. It lasted exactly 24 hours. On April 18th, Iran reversed. The strait was closed again. The stated reason: Washington had refused to lift its naval blockade. And this time, Tehran didn't just announce the closure. The IRGC enforced it. Fast attack boats moved on commercial vessels. At least 3 oil tankers were targeted in a single operational window. Approximately 20 commercial ships abruptly changed course toward Oman in panic. And then came the moment that broke the script entirely. The San Mari Herald, a massive Suezmax-class Indian tanker carrying 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude, was attacked. Her captain had clearance. His vessel's name was second on the IRGC's approved list. It did not matter. Rockets came anyway. And the recording from that bridge, released by maritime tracking platform Tanker Trackers, is something you do not forget once you've heard it. Sea Navy, this is San Mari Herald. You gave me clearance to go. You are firing now. Let me turn back. Silence. That silence lasted approximately 4 seconds on the recording. In geopolitical terms, it lasted much longer, because what it told every maritime operator, every tanker captain, every shipping insurer, and every government with cargo moving through Hormuz was this: Iran's word at this moment means nothing. We're covering every development in this crisis in real time. Subscribe and hit the bell. You don't want to find out what happened 48 hours late. Now here is the curiosity loop that most coverage is completely missing. Why did the U.S. wait until April 19th to board the Tusca? Why that ship? Why that night? Because it wasn't reactive. It was surgical. The USS Spruance had been tracking the Tusca, a 275-meter Iranian cargo vessel, nearly the displacement of an aircraft carrier, for hours. The warnings began 6 hours before the shot was fired. The same transmission repeated across the maritime radio channel every few minutes. Motor vessel Tusca, vacate your engine room. We are prepared to subject you to disabling fire. The Tusca did not turn around. At the calculated moment, the Spruance opened fire with its Mark 45 naval gun. One direct hit to the engine room. The ship went dead in the water. Within minutes, U.S. Marines fast-roped from MH-60 Seahawk helicopters onto the deck. And in the middle of the night, on April 19th, the United States seized an Iranian vessel for the first time in this conflict. CENTCOM released the footage immediately and deliberately, frame by frame, clip by clip, to every television screen and smartphone on the planet. This was not an intelligence leak. This was theater. Washington wanted Tehran to see it. It wanted Beijing to see it. It wanted every IRGC fast boat captain, every shadow tanker operator, every proxy weapons shipment coordinator to understand that the rules had changed. And the force assembled to enforce those new rules is unlike anything this region has seen in decades. At the tip of the spear, Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, the USS Michael Murphy, USS Frankie Peterson Jr., and the USS Spruance, now written into the history of this conflict. Behind them, not one but two full aircraft carrier strike groups. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest warship, accompanied by 90 aircraft and 2 escort destroyers. And alongside it, the USS Abraham Lincoln, establishing a second strike group in the same operational basin simultaneously. 2 carrier strike groups, same water, same moment. But the weapon that most analysts are calling the true game changer isn't a destroyer or a carrier. It's invisible. Task Force 59's AI-powered drone network has transformed the Gulf of Oman into something that has no historical precedent. Unmanned surface vessels, underwater acoustic sensors, thermal imaging arrays. Every vessel transiting these waters is being scanned, not by name, not by flag, but by the unique acoustic signature of its propeller and the thermal fingerprint of its hull. You can change your flag. You can falsify your manifest. You can turn off your AIS transponder, the maritime equivalent of going dark. The system already knows your ship. It knew it the moment you entered a 5 nautical mile detection radius. The Gulf of Oman is no longer a waterway. It is a scanner. And Iran's entire shadow oil export network, built over years of sanctions evasion, flag switching, and document laundering, is being read like an open file. This is exactly the kind of coverage most outlets aren't giving this story. If you want the real picture, subscribe now. We publish every day this crisis is live. But now, and this is the part that should concern every person watching, let's talk about what Iran can actually do. Because dismissing Tehran as helpless is not just wrong, it is dangerous. The IRGC has spent 40 years preparing for a confrontation that looks exactly like this one. And its playbook is not designed to win a conventional war. It is designed to make winning one too expensive to be worth it. The first threat layer is mines. Iran's naval mine stockpile is estimated by open-source intelligence assessments to exceed 5,000 units, the majority magnetically triggered. In a 33-kilometer-wide strait, even a small number of deployed mines can reroute an entire carrier strike group for hours. The U.S. has deployed unmanned underwater minesweeping vehicles, but the discovery of even a single mine force's course changes that cascade across an entire operational plan. The second layer is swarm warfare. Iran operates more than 180 fast attack craft, most equipped with guided missiles or rockets. Their doctrine is not to sink a destroyer. It is to overwhelm its radar systems with simultaneous multi-directional attacks. A close-in weapons system capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute faces a genuine mathematical problem when 30 independent threats arrive from different vectors at the same moment. The third layer is drones, and this is where the economics become genuinely alarming. A single Iranian Shahed 136 drone costs approximately $20,000 to manufacture. The SM-2 missile fired to intercept it costs close to $2 million. In a sustained swarm engagement, the attacker wins the accounting war even if they lose every single drone. The Pentagon, according to reporting by multiple defense correspondents, has now quietly positioned laser-based close defense systems in the Gulf. A direct acknowledgement that traditional missile interception is not a sustainable answer. And beneath the waterline, Iran's fleet of more than 20 Ghadir-class submarines, small, shallow water vessels designed specifically to defeat conventional sonar, represent a threat category that no surface fleet can simply ignore. Washington has prepared a counter for each of these layers. Apache attack helicopters against fast boat swarms, F-35 stealth targeting chains against coastal missile batteries, unmanned underwater systems against mines, 24-hour ISR coverage from E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft overhead. Every threat has a response. But having a response is not the same as being immune, and both sides know it. Now, here is the question nobody is asking loudly enough, and the answer changes everything. If the U.S. blockade reaches full capacity, approximately 80 to 90% of Iran's oil export revenue, which runs between $300 and $500 million per day, could be severed almost instantly. 90% of the Iranian economy depends on maritime trade. Fully loaded tankers are sitting idle right now at Karg Island, Bandar Abbas, and Chabahar. They are waiting. They have nowhere to go. But Iran's oil exports are not the only thing moving through those tankers. For years, U.S. intelligence assessments and investigative reporting have documented how Iran uses its maritime networks to move ballistic missile components, drone engines, and weapons systems to regional proxies, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, armed groups in Iraq and Syria. A boarding authority that can stop those tankers doesn't just cut Iran's income. It severs the supply chain of an entire regional military network. And that is why analysts are describing this operation's strategic multiplier as far exceeding a simple economic blockade. Washington is not just trying to hurt Iran financially. It is attempting to suffocate an entire axis of resistance simultaneously. Here is the tactical detail that makes this even more decisive. The U.S. is conducting its boarding operations not inside the narrow strait itself, where Iran's coastal missiles and fast boats can respond within minutes, but in the open Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, where American destroyers have full 360-degree radar superiority and complete freedom of maneuver. And the tracking network doesn't stop at Hormuz. Coordination between U.S. Central Command and Indo-Pacific Command means Iranian-linked tankers can be intercepted in the Indian Ocean, the Strait of Malacca, and the South China Sea. The shadow tanker network that sustained Iranian oil exports through years of sanctions has been rendered functionally useless. There is no geographic exit from this system, which brings us to the 72 hours that will decide everything. On the morning of April 19th, the same morning the Tusca was seized, 2 U.S. Air Force C-17 transport aircraft landed at Noor Khan Air Base outside Islamabad. Roads around the base were sealed. The Serena and Marriott hotels evacuated guests and suspended reservations. Security cordons locked down Rawalpindi and Islamabad. The second round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks, brokered by Pakistan, was underway. Iran's own delegation had described the first round, held April 11th, as the most intensive diplomatic engagement between the two countries in 47 years. They reported that talks had advanced to within reach of a potential memorandum of understanding. But 2 central issues remained unresolved: the fate of Iran's uranium enrichment stockpile and the permanent reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Then the Tusca was boarded, and Tehran announced it would not send its delegation to the scheduled follow-up talks. Iran's first vice president delivered the regime's response in language that oil markets immediately translated into price: either a free oil market for all or the risk of high costs for everyone. Brent crude jumped approximately 7% to near $97 a barrel. U.S. crude followed to around $90. Analysts warned prices could remain elevated well into 2026, regardless of any deal, because even if agreement were reached, Iran's damaged export infrastructure would require months of repair before meaningful production resumed. Then Donald Trump removed any remaining ambiguity about Washington's position. Speaking from Truth Social in the hours surrounding the Tusca operation, he stated, "We propose a very fair deal. If they refuse, the United States will destroy all of Iran's power plants and bridges. There will be no more nice guys." That is not diplomatic language. That is a binary ultimatum delivered to a country whose ceasefire with the United States expires this Wednesday. Let's be completely clear about what Iran is now facing on 3 simultaneous fronts. Militarily, a blockade it cannot break without triggering an escalation it is not equipped to sustain. Economically, a revenue hemorrhage running at up to $500 million per day, with every alternative export route now tracked, flagged, and subject to interdiction. Diplomatically, a negotiating table it just walked away from, with a 72-hour clock running, and hardliners at home who consider humiliation at Islamabad worse than the consequences of escalation. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer simply a waterway. It is the fulcrum of a confrontation between the world's most powerful navy and a regime that has built its regional influence and its domestic legitimacy on its ability to control a single choke point 33 kilometers wide. One side has two carrier strike groups, an AI-powered digital fingerprinting grid, the world's most experienced special operations forces, and B-52 bombers in the rotation. The other side has asymmetric weapons, geopolitical desperation, the ghost of 40 years of sanctioned survival, and the knowledge that even a temporary disruption of Hormuz sends oil markets into convulsions that reverberate through every economy on Earth. Something has to give. The question is not whether Iran's leverage has been reduced. It clearly has. The question is whether the men in Tehran who make these decisions believe they still have enough leverage to extract meaningful concessions before the ceasefire collapses, or whether the hardliners decide that walking into Islamabad now, after the Tusca, would be a humiliation that ends careers and possibly governments. What happens in the next 72 hours in those negotiating rooms and in the waters of the Gulf of Oman will determine whether this ends at a table or in open water. We will be right here when it does. Continuous coverage, every development, every naval update, every word from Islamabad. If this breakdown gave you the full picture that headlines aren't giving you, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. Because in a story moving this fast, being 24 hours behind isn't just inconvenient. It means you're watching history after it's already been decided. Don't let that be you.